Hi, everyone. I'm Ted Yacucci. Thank you so much for joining me on the channel today. Well, most Americans, at least of a certain age, know what the Zapruder film is. And the Zapruder film, of course, is the 8 millimeter visual representation of the assassination of President John Kennedy in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963. But the Zapruder film tells us so much more than what those few frames that we're all so familiar with, that we all recoil when we see. The Zapruder film tells us so much more, and all we have to do is step back. And when we do that, we realize that the Zapruder film is one of the real keys to solving the JFK assassination. One of the first things that we have to realize is that the Zapruder film that we're all familiar with is not the unedited original Zapruder film. The original Zapruder film showed much different activity than the one that we have been shown by intelligence agencies over the years. The original, the real Zapruder film shows the turn from Houston Street onto Elm Street. It shows the limo actually coming to a complete stop. Most importantly, it shows several frames, not just one frame, but several frames, unfortunately, of the president as the bullet strikes his head from the front and the back of his head is blown out. And that spray, the spray from his head, I know this is tough to hear, but it actually went 3 or 4 feet into the air. And that is what the original Zapruder film not only shows, but it's also what was worked with at the National Photographic Interpretation Center in Washington, D.C. on Saturday night, November 23rd, just the day after the assassination. Now, this truth, this incredible knowledge comes to us through the incredibly diligent and hard work of researchers like David Lifton and Douglas Horn and Peter Janney later. And they began with the Rockefeller Commission in 1975, which really was established to review some of the misdeeds of the CIA over the past decade and a half, and then moved on through the Assassinations Record Review Board, the AARB, in 1978 and 1979. But it was even further after that, the research and the interviews that researchers like Horn and Lipton and Janney did. They actually interviewed people at the NPIC, National Photographic Interpretation Center, who worked with the original material. And they were able to give us an unbelievably great explanation of exactly what was on that original Zapruder film. It's very important that we take a look at the logistics and the sequence of events that surrounded the Zapruder film on the weekend of the assassination. Abraham Zapruder, who was a dressmaker and had his office in the Dow Tex building in Dealey Plaza, knew that that film that he had just shot was extremely valuable. So he went to the Kodak facility in Dallas and he got it developed. He then went to another lab, the Jameson lab, and had 3 copies made. And he showed the film to his family and other people that night. Well, the next morning early, Zapruder showed the film to representatives from Life magazine and also to Secret Service agents. At that point, Life magazine offered Zapruder $50,000 for the print rights of the film so that they could make still frames and then publish them in future magazines. And for years and years and decades, we've all thought that after that, the film was flown to Chicago that Saturday night where it was worked on at Life magazine. But that is not what happened to the film. So on Saturday morning, Abraham Zapruder was offered $50,000 for the print rights to his Zapruder film of the assassination. He agreed. He gave one copy to the Secret Service, who immediately flew back to Washington, D.C., and showed that copy to James Rowley, where the film was studied that Saturday. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. After the Secret Service saw the original film, all of a sudden, Life magazine the next day, Sunday, offered Abraham Zapruder $150,000 to renegotiate the contract, in which they would then now have all copies of the film plus worldwide distribution rights of the motion picture rights. Doesn't make a lot of sense for Life magazine, but maybe they wanted to license it. Okay. So, but what did they do with it? They never used it once. They hid it. They put it away for 12 years until a bootleg copy was actually, that was the first time that it was ever seen. So we have to ask ourselves immediately here, wait a minute, what is going on? Didn't Life magazine take that film to Chicago and make still frames? And didn't isn't that where they told us some junior associate kind of messed up the editing of the film, and that's why we see the glitches and the scratches? No, we know because of the research. What really happened was that the Secret Service took possession of the original film. And it's here that we have to make the point that C.D. Jackson, the publisher of Life magazine, was a long-standing career officer in and out of intelligence. He actually started in the OSS in propaganda in World War II, and then he came out again and worked for President Eisenhower again in propaganda with the CIA. So C.D. Jackson was a lifetime intelligent asset and sometimes full-time employee. So it makes perfect sense that the Secret Service and the CIA would call upon their asset, C.D. Jackson, to lock up the film and not show the original, the real Zapruder film to the American public. Now, all of those researchers and authors that I talked about earlier, they do a great job of talking about and explaining in great detail just the sequence of where the film went that whole weekend, up to the National Photographic Interpretation Center, then over to Hawkeye, the Kodak CIA facility in Rochester, New York, and then back to MPIC for more processing. But we'll just deal here with the general details. What happened was that the film went to the National Photographic Interpretation Center, and a man named Dino Brugione, who you may have heard the his name, and if you haven't seen the interviews with him by Douglas Horn and Peter Janney, you really need to see those. But his reputation is just beyond a question, and he details how on Saturday night two Secret Service agents came right from the airport, and they came with a film, and they hadn't actually seen it as of yet. So they sat down, they all watched it together, and they were all shocked. And all of those things that I mentioned earlier about the car stopping, the turn from Houston to Elm, the fly up of the back of President Kennedy's head and a piece of skull that came out the back that was very, very clear. They said all of that was totally visible. Well, it was Brugione's job to go ahead and put together presentation boards for intelligence and Congress. So what he did was he found out exactly what they wanted, which frames they wanted to be blown up, and then he blew those up along with other folks that were helping him that night. He put together a presentation board, typed up the notes himself. There were two boards side by side with a hinge in the middle. That was the, and so he worked all night on that, and that was of the original Zapruder film. Now, what happened was that all of a sudden, the next night, another crew was called in by the deputy director of NPIC, a guy named Pierre Sands, and a whole nother crew had another film of the Zapruder film, another copy that had been altered. And so this altered film had almost assuredly gone to the Hawkeye plant, the Hawkeye facility. They called it Hawkeye Works in Rochester, New York, the greatest lab in the entire world for anything photogenic, where all the U2 films and photos were taken and everything of a sensitive nature. There, the film was doctored to show it was basically blacked out the back of President Kennedy's head on those frames where the shot took place, and there was other artifacts that were actually put in. It was pretty crude because back in 63 we didn't have CGI and we didn't have a lot of the other stuff, but they did what they could at Hawkeye at that point to alter the film. And then that film went back to the National Photographic Interpretation Center for new boards to be put together. In other words, new presentation boards, which would then be shown to Congress and anyone. They'd be used in the future as part of that whole lone nut Lee Harvey Oswald shot from behind story that was being put together. So this is absolutely incredible. But what do we really need to take from this? Well, we really need to take from this that it was James Rowley, the head of the Secret Service, the chief of the Secret Service, that saw the original film. It went to him Saturday afternoon. As soon as it was given to the Secret Service agents in Dallas, they flew it right back to him. We've talked about James Rowley before in the sense that he was the one that bottled up the whole Chicago plot on November 2nd, 3 weeks before Dallas, when President Kennedy was supposed to be shot in the streets of Dallas on a motorcade from to Love Field. From O'Hare Airport. He was the one. He called the Secret Service agent in charge, Maurice Martineau, at that point, told him not to even write down the agent's reports, but to take oral reports and then just to send them to him and no one else, where he hid them. And then agents in Dallas, Secret Service agents, didn't even know that that attempt on President Kennedy's life had happened 3 weeks earlier. So James Rowley, who I have always said has been one of the absolute prime conspirators behind this whole JFK assassination, is absolutely proven to be one of the conspirators, because we can't just say that he saw the film and then participated in the cover-up. Because of what happened in Chicago, we know that he was an actual conspirator. James Rowley, chief of the Secret Service in 1963, was a conspirator. He conspired to murder the President of the United States. What about James McCone, the CIA chief? Well, we know that he got the original film also and used it. NPIC, National Photographic Interpretation Center, was a CIA photographic center. So McCone was the one not only that saw the original film, saw the original boards, but he was also the one to give the doctored films after Sunday night, when the film came back doctored and they made new boards for it. James McCone was the one that then sent those fake boards and fake doctored film out for distribution as necessary. So can we say that McCone was a plotter? Maybe not, but he certainly was involved as much as anyone can in the cover-up of the assassination. So what does that tell us about the assassination? It tells us what we've been saying all along, The JFK assassination was massive. It was massive, larger than anybody could ever conceive. And it included not just the Allen Dulleses, and those people in the CIA, but the actual current head of the CIA at that time, McCone, and the head of the Secret Service, James Rowley. I'm sorry, I think I may have called John McCone James McCone a couple of times. It's John McCone, who was the director of the CIA in 1963. And what's so interesting is that Abraham Zapruder showed a ton of people the original film that he shot both that Friday night and Saturday morning. So there was an awful lot of people that actually saw the original. And that's why there were so many reports of, well, how come I'm not seeing the car stopped? Because all of those people who saw the original at Zapruder's home or office, they knew that the Zapruder version that was put out to the public wasn't the one that they actually saw. So that really kind of, and again, what makes you upset if you're an American citizen is that every one of these CIA heads and Secret Service heads and high up officers in these services, at least up until I think till current, but at least up until 10 years ago, they had to know. Each of them had to know the truth about the JFK assassination. And you talk about a secret government, you can look at it any way you want of what is a secret government, but that's about as secret as it gets. That we had a coup d'etat in America in November of 1963 that changed our country in an incredible amount of ways for the negative. And all of these people who are sworn to be upholders and protectors of democracy just rode along with the lies, with the story, and never once had the guts, the courage to come forth and say, no, this was the truth. Thanks so much for being with me today, and I look forward to seeing you on our next video.